Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we conclude with Part 13, The Gurus from the Adepts in the Eastern Esoteric Tradition by Manly Palmer Hall. Part 1, The Light of the Vedas. The Gurus. For thousands of years, the religious disciplines of the Hindus have been in the keeping of spiritual teachers. The Indian sects venerate ancient sages and philosophers as the founders of schools and systems. The old teachings descended through the disciples of the original teachers. These disciples, in turn, gathered devout followers whom they instructed. When the disciples attained illumination, they were recognized as masters of the sect and as the spiritual sons and heroes of the early sages. Only those who had been faithful disciples of recognized gurus were entitled to teach the esoteric disciplines. In this way, the streams of Eastern wisdom flowed down through time and now sanctify with their living waters the modern saints of India. Occasionally, as reported in the histories of the various orders, a guru gained unusual distinction for his gifts and powers. He was then regarded as peculiarly overshadowed or inspired either by one of the deities or by the spirit of a celebrated ancient rishi. While it is probable that much of the old wisdom was lost or obscured through the long centuries of descent, it may be accepted without unreasonable doubts that the modern gurus of India are the custodians of the wisdom teachings of the ancient Aryas. It is usual to think of these Hindu religious philosophers merely as teachers, but this is not correct. They more closely resemble the classical Greek philosophers, who formed their schools and became fathers in learning to all their students. The Indian disciple is obligated to obey and serve only his teacher. Earthly ties are of secondary importance, but ethical and moral obligations are respected. In the older times, at least, it would have been considered sheer audacity for any truth seeker to enter upon the religious life without the guidance of a qualified guru. The selection of a teacher might be determined by the reputation of the master or by the natural sympathy which the student might feel for a certain venerable person. Sometimes a miraculous incident or the horoscope indicated the proper choice. Disciples did not feel that obedience to their teacher was a difficult or odious task. Early in their courses of study, they were taught that obedience strengthened and liberated the inner consciousness. It might well be that today's student would become tomorrow's teacher. No one had the right to ask obedience who had not himself learned to obey. It was the duty of the guru to examine into the hearts and minds of his chelas. If he discovered in one traces of pride or arrogance, or in another indications of selfishness or worldliness, these negative tendencies had to be overcome. The mind that was bound to its own conceits was unfit for works of holiness. If, on the other hand, the master noted that a certain disciple was deficient in the courage of conviction, this weakness required correction. Life with the guru was daily contact with practical religious experience. The Kellas watched and listened and benefited according to their individual capacities. A promising student was given encouragement and special assistance. He was advanced as rapidly as his merits deserved. In some cases, the disciple excelled his master. If this occurred, the teacher was well satisfied. Such excellence, however, did not interfere with the master-disciple relationship. As long as he lived, the student respected his teacher, considering that lack of such reverence was an offense against truth. Often the disciple remained with the guru until his death, and was then inspired to form a circle of his own. Sometimes, however, advanced students were required by their teachers to become instructors, and were sent out into the world with the blessing and protection of the guru. While the term master is applied generally to all recognized gurus and saintly ascetics, there are many grades of these spiritual teachers. Some are but humble transmitters of the tradition, and others have already attained to the powers of the fabled rishis. Among themselves, the holy men know which are the more enlightened. The gurus venerate the great masters of their sects, even as they themselves are honored by their disciples. Throughout India, the old secrets of human regeneration are guarded by these heroic saints, who stand ever ready to sacrifice their lives if necessary to protect the integrity of the esoteric doctrine. Under no condition will the gurus reveal the mysteries of the faith to any who will not accept the path of discipleship. Wisdom must be earned, and those unwilling to live the life can never know the teaching. The system includes, therefore, the twofold approach. The guru is both the Prajapati and the Kumara, and he is required to bestow both attributes upon his chelas. Although instruction emphasizes the unfoldment of internal powers of consciousness, there are also many practical considerations. The guru directs the activities of his students into fields of social usefulness. If the disciple shows the necessary qualifications, he is encouraged to equip himself for a learned profession, as law or medicine. He is required to be a good citizen and to fulfill all the normal responsibilities of living. In whatever field of service he selects, usually with the guru's assistance, he is expected to use his mystical knowledge. His standard of conduct is guided by his religious convictions. If the chela is specially fitted to become a religious teacher, he must learn how to guide and direct persons of all classes and degrees of development. In the Maharashtra Saints and Their Teachings, Krishna Rao Venkatesh Gajendra Gadkar, professor of philosophy, HPT College, Naski, Bombay, writes of the Eastern holy men, "Saints are the citizens of the city of God. They know no limitations of time and space. They live for eternity and in eternity. Their affections are not constrained by the consideration of provinces or nations. They live and work for the good of humanity. Though they apparently speak different languages, the thoughts expressed by them are essentially the same, since the subject matter of their thought and discourse is the same, the Godhead." There is no monopoly or privilege in the realm of spiritual wisdom. The saints are the righteous fruits of the intellectual and moral progress of the world and are born for its enlightenment. As previously mentioned, deity, at the beginning of the cycle of creation, caused the Prajapatis and Kumaras to emanate from his own being by the exercise of will and yoga. As the Supreme Lord passed from the state of solitary self-existence, by the extension of his own consciousness, to the condition of becoming the cause and sustainer of phenomenal diversity, his objective powers awoke and were embodied as the Prajapatis. Through them, he brought forth the cosmos out of chaos and established the laws which were to govern the material universe. These laws, unfolding and descending through time and place, produced the lawgivers, the great sages, and the hero kings. In this way, the wisdom of God was manifested in the growth of the tree of knowledge, with its roots in Brahma. The philosophical systems cultured the mentality of those creatures endowed with mind that they might know, and through knowledge might attain mastery over the phenomenal sphere and the materials of which it is composed. Thus, the Prajapatis were the sons of will, but simultaneously the self-existent Lord released through the experience of realization the virgin Kumaras, who were the sons of yoga. After the Creator became aware of the diversity which he had engendered, and in which to a degree he was submerged, he restated his own identity in the midst of his manifestations. This restatement was possible because the divine nature contains within itself the seven potencies of the experience of conscious identity. The Kumaras therefore became embodied in the paths which lead from the world back to participation in the universal over-self. These are the ways of redemption which begin with regeneration and end in illumination. The Kumaras were not the fathers of progeny, but remained as the seven ascetics, who simply waited to be known through spiritual apperception. Although the Kumaras had no direct offspring, they were, like the gurus, spiritual fathers. They were chosen and accepted as the chelas choose and select their masters. In this way, they came to be known as the spirit parents of the saints. The Prajapatis incarnated to become sages, but the Kumaras did not so incarnate. They overshadowed those who sought them and operated from the invisible plane of consciousness. In the human evolutionary pattern, the Prajapatis therefore represented wisdom by tradition, and the Kumaras, wisdom by mystical experience. There is one law for the world and another law for the self. These do not conflict, but should be interpreted as a polarization of the principle of law. The code for the world is to expand toward universal sovereignty through knowledge. The code for the self is to ascend through self-mastery to participation in the substance of truth. In the guru system, the disciple is taught to render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's. The proportions and dimensions of the twofold doctrine must be recognized and accepted. Physical knowledge alone can never discover truth. Spiritual knowledge alone can never fulfill the purpose for the evolutionary process. As man exhales and inhales breath in order to live, he must likewise both objectify and subjectify to fulfill his destiny. The esoteric system in Asia emphasizes the unfoldment of those internal faculty resources which remain, like the Kumaras, unwilling to create progeny until they can generate on their own plane. Truth as reality per se cannot be embodied or manifested on the level of material forms and institutions. Those who seek it must rise through discipline to a sympathetic state of acceptance. This hazardous journey inward and upward is concealed beneath the symbolism of the Kila, climbing the narrow and tortuous path that leads to the remote ashrama of his spiritual master. Although contact with Western cultural systems has profoundly influenced Hindu thinking, no amount of Occidental materialistic conditioning has undermined the Easterner's faith in the Guru system. To quote again from Dr. Gajendra Gadkar, "The aspirant must be initiated into the mysteries of spiritual life only by a master who has realized God. It is only a burning lamp that can light other lamps. Initiation forms the first step in spiritual life. In this respect, the parents or other relatives are of no use, nor is God to be realized merely by strenuous independent thinking or by mastering various sciences. Enlightenment is impossible without a guru, master. Sciences, contemplation and devotion and various practices are of no avail without his grace." The learned doctor's reference to lighting one lamp from another is reminiscent of certain Rosicrucian teachings. The passing on of the lamp means the perpetuating of living truth. To such of their disciples as trim their lamps and provide the necessary fuel, the gurus give the flame of their spiritual intensity. The teacher always objectifies or impersonates the overself, which is the Jadad Guru. As the disciple unfolds his spiritual resources, he advances within the mystical orders until he is overshadowed by one of the rays of the esoteric hierarchy. By this is meant that he releases the powers of the Kumaras which are locked within his own higher nature. He is then sanctified or sainted by his own overself and becomes the servant and disciple of the Supreme Lord. The elaborate descriptions of the rishis, who reappear later as the Buddhist arhats, are unlocked by this same key. Western civilization must ultimately embrace at least the spirit of the guru system. New forms and terms to describe the method of instruction will change the outer appearance, but the principle involved is immutable. Knowledge must be ensouled, or both the knowledge and the knower perish together. Regardless of schooling and formal instruction, the Kumaras refuse to create. Without their participation, learning is merely the accumulation of phenomenal information preserved in the memory. The lamp is there, also the wick and the oil, but there is no flame. No matter how beautiful or perfect the lamp of the mind becomes, it is useless if it cannot give light. The esoteric tradition ensouls or possesses knowledge, but can never be possessed by the mind. The Guru raises knowledge from the dead so that it becomes the firstborn of them that sleep. As the dedicated instrument of the hierarchy, the one who is learned becomes the one who understands. The Kumaras can therefore be said to bestow understanding from within, that is, from themselves. This is a high secret of alchemy, for consciousness is the great transforming and transmuting agent. It should not be assumed that all the gurus of India have attained conscious union with the overself. Spiritual unfoldment is measured by degrees of enlightenment. Some have gone far, others have traveled but a little way. Each, however, has a degree of insight and can open the door to a worthy disciple. Once the essential principles are known, the dedicated student proceeds according to his own capacities. As he advances, he becomes more internally aware of the eternal standard of values. Once the lamp is lighted, the eye of the soul abides in the light. The Kela is better able to recognize and discriminate, and he experiences the guru hierarchy. The seeker searches for that which he needs, and if his little light shines brightly, he will find what he seeks. The higher teachers can only be known and recognized by those who have developed the necessary internal perceptive powers. The search always involves a series of acceptances. Truth is not required or demanded, but is known by a gentle receptivity disciplined by wisdom. The Prajapatis advance wisdom to its reasonable and possible end, and then the Kumaras carry on the program of inner growth. Adeptship in the East is also a term covering a wide range of spiritual accomplishment. It is applicable to those who have accomplished a synthesis of the mind and heart doctrine. The adepts are not necessarily all-knowing, they are self-knowing. They have experienced what may not be put into words. The materialist measures wisdom in the extent of things learned and remembered. The mystic measures wisdom in the terms of experience of self. This self is deity in the sense of Vishnu, the pervader. Union, yoga, with the pervader as universal conscious truth is the fullness of wisdom. It is the personal experience of the divine will. It is the apperception of that which is eternally true and not the possession of worldly wisdom, or that vast mass of data which has no meaning outside the sphere of phenomena. The Eastern adept demonstrates essential wisdom by the use of powers latent in the average human being. He is not a lord over nature, but a servant of the universal purpose. Jesus said, "He that would be the greatest among you, let him be the servant of all." The adept is the servant of the all. He is greater because in him all self-motivations on the level of the personality have been overcome by the motivation of the Supreme Self. This again is in the spirit of Sri Sankaracharya and therefore represents mystical Hinduism. The gurus are in the same way the servants of the adepts, but throughout the hierarchy the term servant is to be understood not as a word implying a menial or a bondsman, but in the sense of a priest serving his altar. The teachers do not merely obey the members of a metaphysical aristocracy. They serve the divine plan as it is revealed by those having greater internal apperception. Principles are served, and the personalities through whom these principles are revealed are respected. There are many schools in India presided over by sanctified masters. Each group is a miniature of the great college of the adepts. The small groups are like cells in a larger body. Altogether they form a spiritual physical organism, and through this body circulates the consciousness energies of the Dhyan Chohans. There is no part or member of this wonderful body which can exist if separated from the general circulation. Even though in the material world the sects may seem to differ, they are reconciled in the consciousness of the adepts who control them. Confusion is apparent rather than real, and exists only on the level or plane of spiritual ignorance. As the disciple advances along the middle road, he comes to the reconciliation of all differences in the experience of union. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.